Well, hello. I wanted to talk to you about the Mandela Effect, or at least my experience of it and my best appraisal of what it is and how it works. The term was coined by researcher Fiona Broome in 2009, but I happened upon the Mandela Effect somewhere about 2017 or 2018. I don't recall too specifically. Probably via a video by Cynthia Sue Larson. Her website, by the way, is realityshifters.com, and her YouTube channel is Cynthia Sue Larson. And she's been looking at the scientific principles underlying what we call the Mandela Effect for decades, since the 1990s, in fact. So I recommend her material as an excellent Mandela Effect resource. So, to begin, what in fact is the Mandela Effect? Simply put, it's an occurrence where a large number of people uniformly remember a phenomenon that is at odds with the commonly accepted version of that phenomenon. Common examples include book titles, song lyrics, lines of dialogue from movies, product names and corporate logos, and even things like features on maps and historical events can be Mandela effects. In fact, the effect gets its name from the phenomenon that, contrary to popularly accepted reality, many people remember Nelson Mandela as having died in prison rather than eventually being released and becoming president of South Africa. Now, people who research Mandela effects report numerous and varied examples. But let me lay out several ones which I personally have noticed to be very commonly experienced. These also represent memories in which people have a high degree of confidence, despite the fact that, being Mandela effects, these memories don't match up with how these things are perceived in the commonly accepted version of reality. I sometimes call this consensus reality. One very commonly experienced Mandela effect is the Berenstain Bears series of children's books. What constitutes the effect is that, in consensus reality, there is no Berenstain Bears series of children's books. It's the Berenstain Bears, with the last three letters being AIN as opposed to EIN. Anywhere you look online, in the purchasing information at any bookseller, Amazon and all the others, the website for the book series, videos from the TV series, you'll see and hear Berenstain Bears. Also, the author's name is universally reported as Stan and Jan Berenstain, and later their son, Mike Berenstain. And yet, personally, I have heard too many people adamantly state that they confidently remember the series being the Berenstain Bears for me to discount that. Many people insist that it was the Berenstain Bears, despite how the name is reflected in consensus reality, which again is always Berenstain. This is why I find this particular Mandela effect one worth mentioning. Here's another example from the world of pop culture. Toward the beginning of the famous Disney film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the evil queen intones an invocation to a sort of omniscient mirror. It's a well-known scene. And numerous people remember the invocation begins with the words, "Mirror, mirror on the wall." But in publicly available video clips of the scene, the words spoken are very clearly, "Magic mirror on the wall." If there are reasons to doubt the video evidence, I don't know what they would be, and as far as I can tell, the scene appears to be an unmanipulated clip from the original film. But as with the Berenstain Bears, large numbers of people confidently remember the Queen's line beginning, "Mirror, mirror," not "magic mirror." These first two examples are from modern popular culture. But there are Mandela effects that stem from much older material, like the Bible. The Mandela effect, which I personally find the most intriguing, comes from the biblical book of Isaiah, specifically chapter 11, verse 6. This is an immensely well-known verse, and vast numbers of people remember the first words as, "The lion shall lie down with the lamb." This is not just a biblical verse. It is an enormous cultural touchstone for much of the Judeo-Christian world, dating back hundreds of years at least. But if at the present time you look at a Bible, you will see that the word lion is replaced with wolf. This is true for any of the many versions of the Bible and also across various languages. For instance, the King James Version says, "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb." The Orthodox Jewish Bible has it, "The Zeev also shall dwell with the Kevis." Zeev is wolf and Kevis is lamb. And the Revised Standard Version has, "The wolf shall live with the lamb." The Biblia Reina Valera in Spanish uses the word lobo, and the Bible Catholique Crampon in French uses the word loup. Both words mean wolf. The universal replacement of lion with wolf has come as a big surprise or even a shock to a large number of people who consider this replacement having taken place. Looking online, you'll see many references, text or image, to a lion lying down with a lamb. These are often religious in nature, or sometimes they are secular depictions of a lion and a lamb, loosely referring back to the general biblical idea. But in either case, they demonstrate how widespread the idea of this particular lion-lamb juxtaposition is. People who research the Mandela Effect refer to such references as residue, that is, artifacts of a perspective on or memory of a phenomenon which diverges from its state in consensus reality. Another commonly cited Mandela Effect concerns stovetop stuffing, a food product popular in North America. It's a memory maintained by many people that it was always Stouffer's stovetop stuffing, that is, made by the Stouffer's company. But in consensus reality, the product was made by General Foods, now a part of Kraft Heinz. I don't personally have a strong memory as to the product's ownership, but for numerous people, it is distinctly a Mandela Effect. I could go on to enumerate many different Mandela Effects, but I'll just mention one more. In 1891, the famed author Oscar Wilde wrote a novel which I, and many others, remember being titled The Portrait of Dorian Gray. But if you look now, the vast majority of references you can find list the novel's title as The Picture of Dorian Gray. This includes listings at booksellers and in reference resources, the Encyclopedia Britannica, for example. But there are curious exceptions. One magazine article I found used portrait rather than picture when mentioning the novel's title, and a blurb for a particular edition of the book on Amazon has it as The Portrait of Dorian Gray. So there is a small sample of some frequently experienced Mandela effects. And it's worth mentioning that the phenomenon is unique to each person. Those who experience them experience their own subset of Mandela effects. So at this point, you might be wondering, why is any of this important? Isn't all this just a case of some people misremembering some things? I don't think so. In fact, I think that what we call the Mandela effect is the sort of user-friendly outer layer of a phenomenon of great depth. What may seem like simply a divergence of perspectives on a collection of pop culture subjects is actually a kind of entryway or on-ramp to something very profound. What exactly I mean by that, I'll get to shortly. But first, let me lay out some of the other explanations people have put forward for what the Mandela effect is. Most commonly, misremembering. When confronted with a Mandela effect, that is, the dissonance between a memory and the way that thing remembered is viewed by consensus reality, a common reaction is simply to consider one's memory faulty. People will sometimes say, well, I guess it was always the Berenstain Bears, and I just thought it was the Berenstain Bears. Shrugging off discrepancies like this as misremembering is a commonly employed practice. It provides a quick solution to the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. But in such cases, are we sure we've misremembered? Or are we adopting consensus reality's view of the thing in question due to the social weight we're accustomed to affording a majority view? Well, I'm neither psychologist nor neuroscientist nor memory expert, but I am aware that I can't say definitively what it means to misremember, and I don't know that anyone else can either. Might some people in some of these Mandela Effect cases be misremembering? I certainly make room for that possibility. But it's important to remember that modern neuroscience is in its infancy. We do not have anything like a comprehensive model of human consciousness, nor specifically of human memory. We say in common parlance that I am or someone is misremembering something, as though we have a solid understanding of what that means. We don't. To give an unquestioned response that I am or you are misremembering is simply to invoke a habitual practice. We're accustomed to resolving cognitive dissonance in this way, but to do so without examination is to explain something away rather than to explain it. But really, the reason I'm skeptical that misremembering is a comprehensive explanation for many Mandela effects is the sheer number of people who uniformly hold the same alternate memory in these cases. A large collection of people remember the Berenstain Bears rather than the consensus reality name. What's more, these people remember Berenstain rather than, say, Bernstein, which is a more common surname. Similarly, the Bible verse saying the lion shall lie down with the lamb is uniformly remembered by a huge number of people. In other words, it's always lion and not some other animal. The same uniformity is true for many Mandela effects, while the number of people affected varies in each case. Another explanation sometimes put forward to explain the Mandela effect is confabulation. Confabulation is a kind of memory error people sometimes make, and it is often described as an unconscious process where people fill in gaps in their memory with incorrect information. But as I see it, confabulation is not a strong contender as an explanation for the Mandela effect. The main reason is that confabulation is typically associated with brain disorders, such as Alzheimer's disease, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, and others. But the Mandela effect is something experienced by a wide cross-section of the population, not some subset experiencing brain disorders. I've never seen any scientific evidence linking the Mandela effect to brain pathology. If any is available, I'll certainly give it serious consideration. But absent such evidence, I don't think confabulation is involved with the Mandela effect. Now, there is a school of thought that the Mandela effect is a phenomenon brought about by certain high-energy physics experiments conducted by the European Organization for Nuclear Research, known as CERN, particularly experiments employing CERN's LHC, or Large Hadron Collider. The background for this line of thinking may be that CERN has publicly stated the LHC could create quantum black holes. These are tiny, and not the same as the better-known cosmological black holes with their famously powerful gravitational force. And it could be that some people are confusing the two types of black holes. As relates to the Mandela effect, the general idea is as follows. According to various online sources, at one point, a social media post referred to a CERN apology for ending the world in the year 2012. These sources all indicate that the claim of a CERN apology was false. But between the black hole references and the notion of a CERN apology, and maybe for other reasons as well, some people have adopted the idea that the LHC somehow brought about some alternate reality, the move to which accounts for certain of people's memories no longer matching the current reality, this being the essence of the Mandela effect. As for myself, I don't subscribe to any Mandela effect theory along these lines. As far as I'm able to determine, people seem to have gotten the wrong idea about the capabilities of and statements from CERN. As you might imagine, CERN spokespeople have denied any connection between the LHC, alternate realities, and the Mandela effect. I also wanted to mention another idea many people have some familiarity with, known as the simulation hypothesis, an idea put forward by philosopher Nick Bostrom. A number of people have proposed this as an explanation for the Mandela effect. The idea being that the reality we experience is not as it appears, but instead is an advanced computer simulation which we, its inhabitants, take as real. Now, this general idea of a simulation has had many variants historically, from Plato's cave to The Matrix in the series of movies by the same name. From this perspective, some people argue that the Mandela Effect is the result of whoever is conducting the simulation making tweaks to the computer program such that people's memories no longer match consensus reality. As some say, Mandela effects are a glitch in the matrix, anomalous indicators that the commonly agreed upon reality is being manipulated. Or perhaps they think people's memories are being manipulated, the mismatch arising from that. While I'm sympathetic to the broad notion that the reality we experience is not as we perceive it to be, I don't subscribe to the simulation hypothesis per se, nor to the other simulation schools of thought which people sometimes suggest. In general, I find them unnecessarily dystopic. These perspectives seem to posit a controlling entity out there somewhere, exerting dominance over those of us within the simulation. And I don't see the necessity, nor much in the way of evidence, for such a manipulative view. So, as such, I don't take the opinion that Mandela effects are caused by these types of simulations. So then, what do I think is the nature and the mechanism of the Mandela effect? Well, to begin, I think we're dealing with something surprisingly profound and far-reaching. For about a century now, the discipline of quantum physics has consistently documented the phenomenon known as superposition on the subatomic scale. In quantum physics, superposition can refer to a condition where a particle, an electron say, can be said to have more than one instance of a single property simultaneously. It might, for instance, have multiple locations at once or multiple velocities at once, strange as that sounds. In the quantum world, it's as though a coin could be heads up and tails up at the same time. Or to use physicist Erwin Schrödinger's famous illustration, it's as though a cat could be both alive and dead simultaneously in parallel realities. But this situation begs a question scientists have been asking for a long time. Since the big stuff in the universe is made of the small stuff, objects are made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which are made of subatomic particles, why don't we see superposition on larger scales of the universe, say the human scale? Well, enter the Mandela effect. That is, perhaps we do see superposition, or something very much like it, on the human scale and have only recently begun to recognize it. Definitions can obscure proper perception, and Mandela effects are frequently defined as impossible and so dismissed as misremembering. Things defined as impossible will be removed from consideration until they're redefined as possible. So it is with the idea that 1. A memory of something, and 2. A differing perception of that something according to consensus reality could both be true. Redefinition of this kind requires a willingness to reconsider our habitual pattern of resolving cognitive dissonance of the Mandela effect type. Resistance to changing these habitual responses is natural, and the decision to reevaluate them appears to come on people's individual timetables. I'm just trying to point out that there are other explanations for the Mandela effect that, as I see it, match the evidence better than the idea of misremembering. But this superposition idea places things into completely separate realities, whereas people who experience Mandela effects seem to be citizens of multiple worlds at once, the consensus world and the world of their renegade Mandela memories. They're aware of the Mandela effect precisely because of the difference between the two. So how does that work? It's my suspicion, and that of a number of other people, that the Mandela effect is the hallmark of a shift in consciousness, a reality shift, as Cynthia Sue Larson says. The Mandela effect occurs when people move in consciousness from one reality to another. Hence, Mandela-affected people find themselves in disagreement with those not affected about the states of certain properties of reality. Is it the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstein Bears? There's the consensus view and the Mandela memory view. The conflict arises because people have come to believe there is only one reality. Part of the problem is that, other than the specific Mandela effects one may experience, the realities people inhabit are overwhelmingly similar. This strongly reinforces the belief that there is just one reality and can cause people to fight over the correct states of the few properties that don't match up, the idea of multiple realities being unfamiliar and hard to accept. To add to the difficulty, people frequently experience a strong feeling of attachment to their version of the diverging properties and feel threatened when others put forward a different view of those things. Any hope of reconciliation depends upon being willing to at least entertain the idea of parallel realities in some sense. Just to be clear, my take on the Mandela effect isn't precisely based on quantum superposition as defined by science, but rather on the general notion of alternate or parallel realities and shifts between them. As I said earlier, I first heard this idea from Cynthia Larson. I reference superposition to point out that the general idea of alternate realities has scientific evidence behind it. That said, I'm certainly not able to definitively state the cause of the Mandela effect. As to the detailed specifics of my personal view of these alternate realities and how they operate, that I'll leave for another video I have planned. On another note, science has recently begun to research the Mandela effect. Scientists at the University of Chicago have done a study detailing their experiments with certain visual Mandela effects, which are shown here. The study is soon to be published in the peer-reviewed scientific journal, Psychological Science. And although they choose to define any memory that diverges from consensus reality as a false memory, their study clearly shows people reporting the same Mandela effect memories in a way the researchers cannot account for. In their words, the Mandela effect memories are, quote, shared and specific, unquote. As an article in Vice.com magazine describing the study puts it, their research is fascinating because it demonstrates that the Mandela effect is real. That is, random people have a collective false memory of popular brands, logos, characters, etc. They found that people consistently had the same false memory, meaning that people consistently selected the wrong image as the one they remembered. Bear in mind, the false memory characterization is unproven and stems from the assumption that anything not matching consensus reality must necessarily be false. A question people sometimes ask once they've become acquainted with this phenomenon is, why now? If the Mandela effect is a manifestation of how reality operates, why have we only recently begun experiencing it? I can think of 3 reasons. Number 1, technology. People can now share their experiences via the internet with an ease and with a speed they couldn't before, including their ideas about the Mandela effect. Social media in its various forms especially gives people a chance to share and compare their opinions on the status of Mandela effect phenomena, argue, consider possible explanations, etc. Prior to the internet era, this was much less possible. Number 2, acceptance of new perspectives. With at least the idea of parallel realities now firmly a feature of books, TV shows, movies, and other pop culture creations, the modern psyche is more likely to recognize in a Mandela effect the familiar notion of simultaneous worlds wherein 2 or more seemingly contradictory phenomena can exist at the same time. As I said before, things defined as impossible will be removed from consideration until they're redefined as possible. Familiarity with the concept of parallel realities allows people the opportunity to see a plausible explanation for Mandela effects beyond simple misremembering. In other words, what was once hidden in plain sight becomes visible once certain filters of belief are removed. These filters are just lately being removed. Number 3, sensitivity. It may be that as human consciousness evolves, people develop an increasing sensitivity to phenomena and states of consciousness they previously didn't have access to. And again, I do suspect the Mandela effect is essentially a shift in consciousness between realities. Like technical instruments of increasing sensitivity, people may, in recent times, have become more readily able to sense the existence of phenomena from other realities bleeding through into the consensus agreed upon reality. If so, such a trend will be very interesting to watch. Sometimes a phenomenon of real weight and profundity also has a superficial aspect, which unfortunately serves to hide the serious nature of the underlying circumstance. People may understandably object to the idea that the Berenstain Bears children's books or stovetop stuffing could have anything to do with cutting-edge quantum theory or alternate realities. But I simply suggest to any who are interested in doing so that you take a step back and give the Mandela effect a chance. Consider the idea that, for at least some Mandela effects, thousands of people aren't uniformly misremembering. The key is to trust your own experience. And if your experience is like most people's, for many common Mandela effects, you will very likely remember what consensus reality holds to be true on the subject, along with the majority of people. But if you keep an open mind, you may well happen upon some Mandela effects. Again, these are situations where you have strong memories of certain phenomena that diverge from consensus reality. If the shoe fits, you may indeed be Mandela affected on those subjects. The idea being that most people experience only some Mandela effects and not others. It's highly individual. In closing, I'll mention what I think is valuable about the Mandela effect is that it invites people to a careful examination of their own subjective experience, an experience of consciousness and memory. If you're interested in learning more about the Mandela effect, check out the information in the description for this video. There are links to the websites and video channels for the International Mandela Effect Conference, or IMEC, and its board of directors, all of whom have really thoughtful content on the subject and related topics. IMEC has hosted online and in-person conferences on the Mandela effect and does regular live streams with updated research on the subject. Thanks for watching.